Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm your host, Richard Dugan, and I thank you so much for joining us on the radio broadcast at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on a Sunday and Monday mornings at 1 a.m. The broadcast podcasts are available on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, as well as richarddugan.com, the homepage, as well as the radio shows page. And we encourage you, if you can, to support us financially to keep the programs moving forward and take care of all of the ancillary things through PayPal and Patreon accounts. They are for your security as well as ours. We hope that you will do your part and do what you can if you feel led to do so. We'll even take energetic support as well. And we also encourage you to go to our guest's website. We'll be giving you that during the interview so that you can continue your evolutionary process. We also encourage you to spend time in meditation, in prayer, in just quiet time during 2020, the year of perfect vision, and the 2020s, the decade of perfect vision. And we hope that you will do that. Listen to that still small voice, that divine self, your higher self, and follow the promptings. And find that still, small, quiet, peaceful place where you can just relax and get a hold of what's really important in your life. We encourage you to do that, and we also encourage you to stay tuned to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan. Stay tuned. Our guest is a very special guest who is joining us all the way from New York, and his name is Dr. Joseph Cardillo. He's PhD. He's a national leader in holistic healthcare. He's the best-selling author of several books in the fields of health, mind, body, spirit, and psychology. And his latest book that we're going to be talking about is The 12 Rules of Attention. Stay at attention, ladies and gentlemen. In the back of my mind, I'm hearing that line from the Cheech and Chong album where the teacher is going, class, and they're not listening, and it's going, shut up. And so that's probably one of the rules. Maybe not. We'll find out from our guest, Dr. Joseph, and how to avoid screw-ups, free up headspace, and to do more and be more at work. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Joseph, for joining us here on the program, if I may refer to you as such.
Yes, thank you for having me, Richard.
This is an area we get into quite often here on the program, having to do with health and wellness and taking care of mind, body, and soul. And it is something that sometimes befuddles folks. I've made no bones about my personal health issues on this program. I lost vision in my left eye through glaucoma when I moved to Santa Barbara in my 50s. I acquired high blood pressure after moving to Santa Barbara in 2006. And just recently I had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. You'd kind of think that I'm falling apart, that I'm going downhill, and I just turned 60. Well, my diabetes is in check. I don't have it anymore. My readings are right where they were in the 100 area before the pandemic. It was the pandemic that caused them, i.e. comfort foods. I mean, who wasn't eating comfort foods in April, May, June, July, August?
That's
Maybe
right.
They're still doing it. And then lots of sugar and carbohydrates and all of that stuff. Who knows how many people weren't before but are now type 2 diabetic. I am not anymore. I will tell you that right now. And I have no intention of ever going back there. I've had aches and pains, but I've also lost some weight, and it was primarily through that. So now those aches and pains in the joints are gone. I still deal with this, that, and the other thing. I wish there was a way of taking something that would repel bugs like mosquitoes. I don't know about up where you live, but when I work outside when it's warm, they're eating. They're eating well, let me tell you. I consider myself prime real estate. But a lot of people, they don't take a look at the totality of what it takes to get the mind, body, and spirit, if you will, back in balance. And a lot of times it's hard to do anything with the mind or the spirit if the body is ailing, is diseased, is hurting, and malfunctioning, shall we say. What my wife was saying when I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and we made the agreement and commitment that we were going to go back to the diet we were on before the pandemic, which is lots of vegetables, fruits, low sugar, low carb, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my blood sugar was around 100 on a regular basis. My A1C was around 100 on a regular basis. And, we did that. And she says, this is what she said. She says, what you're going to do is you're going to heal your pancreas. If I'm understanding correctly, that's what creates the insulin. But a lot of people, they don't have that awareness. Is that a fair assessment from your perspective and your practice?
Yeah, I think that that attention and awareness is really behind everything. I mean, everything you're talking about, that's for sure.
So give us, you've got this new book having to do with attention, because we need to pay attention. You've got these 12 rules of attention. I kind of feel like this is along the lines of the 10 commandments of sorts. And we want to avoid screw-ups. On the one hand, we want to free up headspace. There's a part of me that with that one feels as though we want to go in, we want to run defrag, we want to run check disk on our hard drive, and then we want to uninstall anything that we're not using. Unfortunately, the brain doesn't quite work that way. Or does it? What does it mean to free up headspace?
Well, it's a little bit of both. It does and it doesn't.
Thank you.
How do you like that? How do you like that for an answer? Yeah, I mean, it does or it doesn't. My whole approach to attention training in my book, The 12 Rules of Attention, is that what we need is to regulate our attention. And so when we regulate our attention, we're using the mechanisms in our brain, in our mind, that allow us to take control. When we're not regulating our attention's still working, but it's not under our control. And what's really astounding to me is that, some of the things that got me into this were the repetition of workplace error that we all have. We say to ourselves, oh no, not again. How many times have, I can remember back my mother, oh, if I had $1 for every time I did that, and that kind of thing. So you could, whatever that means to you and your listeners. But it's during those moments when we're not necessarily in control, and when we're not in control and our attention is doing its thing, it's choosing for us how we're going to behave, what we're going to think, how we're going to act, even what we're going to feel, even our motor movements. It's taking control of the whole body and mind. And the outstanding statistic is that 96% of our day goes that way. So, on one hand, when I say these things to people, they say, oh my goodness, 96% of my day, I'm doomed. But not really. We sort of evolved into this, and evolution has blessed us with another mechanism that takes control for us. And if it didn't take control for us, we'd have to relearn everything that we know. Every time we get in the car, we'd have to start from scratch. So we're kind of automated.
Yeah.
We're kind of automated all day long. Number one, if we've perfected something, that's great. Athletes like to perfect things and then not have to think about it.
Exactly.
And any of us who have ever played any sport know that if you have to think about it, you can't really do it yet. So you want to automate it, just like driving a car. But on the other hand, our mistakes are also automated. Our errors are automated. One of the other statistics that's really kind of an outstanding kind of statistic is that there's over $650 billion of error made at workplaces due to distraction and workplace error. So, that's something for organizations and industries and so on. On the other hand, 82% of people feel that their greatest ingrained, inborn talents are wasted at the workplace. So you put the two together and you have to ask the question, is there a relationship between error, workplace error, and this feeling, this overwhelming feeling? 82% of people feel that their greatest talents are wasted at the workplace. When you put the two together, it's not so hard to imagine why we're distracted so easily. So, automation has its thing. It allows us to filter through overwhelming information on a daily basis, on a moment by moment basis, zero in on what's important. But if we're not using it, it also encourages us to continue the way we're moving about in this world. And if there's problems in there, we're just going to repeat them, whether they're physical, whether they're cognitive, whether they're emotional, whether they're motor skill, whatever they are, we're just going to repeat them.
Exactly. I'm Richard Dugan. This is Tell Me Your Story. We're talking with Dr. Joseph Cardello, and we're talking about his book, as you see on the screen, The 12 Rules of Attention. And that's the focus of today's program. And we hope that you will stay attentive to our program today as we talk about this. You talk about screw-ups. You talk about overcoming those in that respect. And I want to sort of, how do I put this? I want to take, as the phrase, I love the phrase, umbrage with the phrase screw-ups. I have been trying to eliminate two words from not only my vocabulary, but pretty much everyone's, because I think that they're unfair in that they get us thinking in certain ways that we really, it messes with us. And those two words, interestingly enough, are success and failure. And here's the reason why. And you've heard this example over and over again, I am sure, right? You've heard this example of Thomas Edison. And he was asked one day, someone walked into a shop and he saw all of those different versions of the light bulb and was asked, so how many times did you fail before you discovered how a light bulb worked? And he says, I never failed. I just found 990 ways the light bulb didn't work. Now that's to me a whole different perspective than that he failed 990 times. And that his process wasn't about success or failure. His process was not only about creating the light bulb, an incandescent light bulb, which now is being replaced by the LED, at a rather fast pace, but it was also about the learning process. Isn't that part of what education is about? And I'm talking more so formal education. I know that we've got rote memorization, which, boy, it would be a shame if we stayed with that much longer. That is a mess, because it doesn't really create a practical understanding of what it is that we are being told we're supposed to learn. I mean, didn't you ever say when you were in school, when am I ever going to use trigonometry or calculus or stuff? I'm going to be a garbage man, or whatever it is you're going to be. Okay. And we just don't know, because we don't know what our future is going to be. But what about that? Maybe help us to define that phrase screw-ups a little bit better in that context of, say, success and failure.
Oh, there's a whole part. There's a whole part of one of the chapters in the book that deals with mistakes and how many tremendous inventions and insights and creative ideas and theories have come from initially mistakes. All great things, you'd start to think, came from some kind of a mistake.
I think because the Post-it was one of those that came out of he was going a totally different direction with whatever he was doing with the liquid he was working with, and
Yeah.
inadvertently came up with the Post-it.
Yeah, penicillin.
The
I mean,
penicillin's another one.
there are so many things, and I had an entire section in a chapter on that kind of thing. So mistakes are just tremendous moments in time for us to become enormously creative and understanding in a way that we didn't intend. That's what I like, because if we, and remember, most of the time we're just doing things on automatic drive. And as soon as we get out of that automatic drive and say, oh my goodness, I did something I didn't intend on doing here. This is a mistake. Oftentimes, if you look at it and you look at what you can do with that, sometimes it'll bring you into just insights. So that's true. The screw ups I'm talking about are what I'll tell you the screw ups I'm talking about. I'm going to give you a couple of fun ones at first, and then I'm going to get into a few more serious ones. The screw ups that I'm talking about are, I go out, look, there's a lot of humor, and that's another one of the things that got me into this whole thing with attention. There's a lot of humor to how the human attention mechanism works. Who hasn't gone to the grocery store, for example? I've done this so many times. Who hasn't gone to the grocery store to buy one item? I'm only going there for this one reason. I go to the grocery store, I buy a whole basket full of groceries. I go home, half the way home, I realize I didn't get the very thing I went there to. Who hasn't done that? All right, so we've done that. Who hasn't gone out to the parking lot and headed for a red car, and then all of a sudden or a white car or whatever it is, a blue car, and you get to the car and you realize, oh my God, that's not my car. It's somebody else's car. I had one person at a workshop I was giving tell me, I actually got in the car. He told me.
Oh, wow.
Whenever we talk about these things, people tell me their own stories, and they're all so good, or, somebody calling out to somebody they think is their own wife. And the person turns around, it's somebody else, and there's worse versions of that, but I'll just stop at this,
Mm-hmm.
But so now, let's up the ante a little bit. So let's say that you're at work and, you're dealing with your colleagues, or you're in the family dealing with people in your family or with your partner, and maybe your partner rolls their eyes or something like that, and all of a sudden you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, oh, I told myself I'd never do that again because he or she explained to me why they do. I told myself I'd never do that again. Yeah. Or somebody expresses an idea that's completely different than yours. Mm-hmm. And you're automatically shutting yourself off to the very thing that you need.
Yeah.
And it's funny, because one time, this goes back about 15 years or so, but I never forgot it. One time I bumped into an individual right at the wrong time, and I was on the run. Mm-hmm. And I needed to finish a piece of research by whatever it was. Let's say it was 4:00. I needed to finish it by then. And the clock was running and I couldn't be interrupted. But the problem was, it was taking me a while because I wasn't there yet. And so this individual stops me. I had gone to get some water, and this individual spotted me and started talking to me. And I said to myself, oh no, now I'm never gonna get this done. And so I said, you know what? I mentally said to myself, why don't you practice what you preach in this moment? And it was a dangerous moment to practice what I preach. Sometimes it's easy. This wasn't easy because I had a deadline. So I said, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stay right here in this moment. And I stayed there, and son of a gun, and I mean this, I mean this, if that individual didn't deliver exactly what I need, and he didn't even know it. He didn't even know it, but he said something, and it was exactly what I needed to go upstairs and finish my research. And I got it done on time, and I didn't have to do the work. There I was. And so I have practiced that many times. I've and I'm not, it's not like I'm perfect. Like I can do that all the time. I still, but I remind myself, this was 15 years ago, maybe plus.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it distinctly because I forced myself to stay there. And there was the information. It was almost like the research was done without me having to complete it. And there was the piece I was missing. And so my habit, my mistake, my screw up would have been to walk away from that.
Right.
And so that's how I define it. When because so much of what we do is on autopilot. Remember, 96% is on autopilot, and it's triggered in a millisecond. We almost can't win. And that's why attention comes in, because attention is the brain's mechanism against all that. So if you want to be better focused, if you want to avoid things like what I just described and worse,
Mm-hmm.
Some people back into people and hit them in parking lots.
Yeah.
If you want to avoid whatever your train wreck is, telling yourself, I'm going to pay attention next time, I guarantee you won't work.
Mm-hmm.
It won't work because the way that mechanism works in our brain is locked in to electrical and chemical coordinates.
Okay.
And you got to get in there and change that, or it will change you.
Okay.
It will make you act in ways you don't want to act. And that's why we repeat the same. We've got all these phrases. I've heard people say, well, same thing, different place.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
We go to a different place, we do the same thing over again. We get into a different relationship, we do the same thing over again. Somebody gives up one type of toxin, and they get involved in another. It's got to do with substance abuse. It's got to do with relationships. It's got to do with study habits, everything. We've got to go in and literally change that thing, that electrochemical pattern, and then it'll change us. And then that'll be our pattern until we decide to change it. But once you know how to get in there and regulate it, just like your cell phone, when you know how to get in there and use some of the apps that are in there, you can make the thing hum for yourself. And that's what I'm about. I want the statistic that was most outstanding to me regarding attention and distraction and all that wasn't so much, the errors that we make at the workplace, but why we doing that. It's not the cell phone. It's not these things. I hate to tell anybody, but it's us. It's an organic thing inside us that we could correct so easily and have so much fun doing it. And the next thing you know, we're operating the way we want to operate. We're the person we want to be. And so,
yeah, I saw a documentary just the other day on the technology of CRISPR, genetic engineering. And one of the comments that was made by one of the participants, I thought was very profound. And it applies in this instance, and it applies in just about every other instance. And that is that it is not the technology that is the problem, that is either good or bad. It's how we use it, period.
Absolutely.
How we choose to use it, whether it's a cell phone, whether it's CRISPR, it doesn't matter. We're talking with Dr. Joseph Cardello, and we're talking about these wonderful rules, these 12 rules. I want to talk about how. I mean, we could go into the 12 rules. That'd be wonderful to do. But I want to find out how you go about changing the chemical pathways, the neurological pathways, how you rewrite that information so that we don't sit there saying, I'll pay more attention next time. You won't have to, because you're already paying attention. Don't go away. We'll be right back. This is Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World.
Tell me your stories. I'll do my best to understand you.
welcome back to Tell Me Your Story. I left you on a cliffhanger, didn't I? I hope so. We want you to pay attention. Stay with us here on the program with Dr. Joseph Cardello, and we're talking about the 12 rules, those wonderful, miraculous 12 rules of attention, how to avoid screw-ups, free up head space, do more, and be more at work. And we thank you so much for staying with us here on the program as well, Doctor. And I ended the last segment by asking you, how do we rewrite the neural pathways? How do we reformulate the chemistry? Because you used both of those analogies, those items there, in order to stop even having to consider saying, I'll pay attention next time.
That's a great question. That's great. And I'm going to try to frame that, because really that's getting into the heart of the matter. So first, I want to say that our attention mechanism is like an ultra sophisticated fetching mechanism. And so whenever we're in an experience, whatever that experience is, what happens, and this happens in a millisecond, our mind sends out kind of like a little scout to find solutions for us. So for example, I just had, let's say I just had a very difficult email from someone, and I responded to it, and I have to go to an office meeting. Or my partner just rolled his or her eyes for the 1,000th time. and I'm going to have this response. We have the response so fast that we feel that there's no time between I see somebody roll their eyes, I respond. Somebody cuts me off on the highway, I respond one way or another. But what's happening is our attention mechanism in a millisecond is sending out scouts, and those scouts traverse our memories of similar incidents. They traverse our feelings during those incidents, our feelings as we were approaching those incidents. They traverse our thoughts within those incidents. They traverse it all. And then they report back to us in a millisecond. And part of our attention mechanism, the CEO, let's say, of our attention mechanism, our executive attention, makes a decision in a millisecond. I'm going to go with this one, with this fix. And so why do we, I talked about the negative pattern. We do something that we wish we didn't do, and then we say, I did it for the 1,000th time. Why does that happen? Well, the reason that it happens is because what those scouts go looking for are patterns. These are the patterns. This is what you felt, this is what you thought, and then this is how you acted within this situation when it came up before. And it brings it back and it reports it. And you go generally, unless you intercede, unless you regulate it, you'll go with the most common pattern, with a pattern that is most dominant. In other words, the one I've been using lately. That's what you'll go with. And so we can change that. In order to change it, we have to change the pattern. And it doesn't work like magic. It's different. The kind of stuff that I talk about is different than a pharmaceutical, for example. A pharmaceutical kind of kicks in right away, full force. These kind of mind-body, natural ways of regulating our thoughts and feelings and behaviors and even our physiology don't work that way. They take a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, to really kick in entirely. So you might feel a little benefit right away. You might say to yourself, well, I'm going to change that pattern, but then the pattern doesn't change. You can't get down on yourself, because the way it works is what happens is you're developing a new pattern, and what happens is you're weakening that old pattern that's firing in your head. You're weakening that. So the first time you try it, you'll probably default back to that pattern you don't like, and you'll keep defaulting back to it. But each time when you visualize yourself re-engaging a new pattern, you'll weaken the old one until it disappears. And eventually it'll get weak enough, the new one will take over, weaken it even further, and it'll disappear. And the new one will be your ongoing default pattern. Then it'll be automatized and you don't have to worry about it. You'll act the way you want until you want to change it. But if you don't mind, I'm going to tell you a couple of things that work like magic.
Okay. I like magic.
Yeah, I like it too. I like it too. So there's two mechanisms that are connected to this that have become so much a part of our vernacular. One is the term awareness. Be aware, make yourself aware. You know, you say, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What is awareness? You know, how's that different from attention? And mindfulness. You know, when I started seeing mindfulness, I don't know about you, but when I started seeing mindfulness on the cover of huge commercial magazines, maybe more than once a year, I started thinking, we've come a long way, baby. We really have.
Yeah.
And I mean, 50 years ago, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. So what awareness is, awareness to me is just a magical mechanism. Not really. It's hardwired, but it works magic.
Yeah.
We don't use it enough. Here's how it works. Both of my daughters at the moment are upstairs studying because that's what they do these times. During these times. So they're upstairs studying right now. And I don't need to be paying attention to them at all to be aware of the fact that they're up there. If I were boiling some water for a cup of tea in the kitchen, I'm aware of the fact that I'm doing that, but I don't necessarily have to be paying attention to it to know that that's what's going on in the kitchen right now. So awareness works that way. The benefit of awareness is this. Let's say I'm driving down the highway and I see a sign, and the sign is for a really tight hairpin turn. You know, those there, we don't want to go around more than 5 miles an hour.
If that,
yeah, there's a couple of those here in the Berkshires, you know, and you really got to watch it. So out here, we start to get road signs a couple of miles before the hairpin turn. That was the really bad ones like that. And so you're reminded a couple of times there's a hairpin turn coming up. You can't be paying attention to the hairpin turn because it hasn't happened yet, but you're aware that it's coming up. Now, why would motor vehicle do that? The reason, well, because they want you to take the turn safely. But here's what's going on upstairs that makes it work, that makes those signs work. What happens is that once you're aware of something, when you're trying to pay attention to this overwhelming burst of detail, and you're trying to find the detail that makes sense to the present moment, once you're pre-aware of anything, you'll spot those details first. So and that has a good and negative side, but let's look at the good side. So if I'm aware of the hairpin turn, as soon as the details start presenting, oh, this must be it, then I pay attention to those details. My attention goes right to those details. The other cool thing about awareness is that when your attention goes to it, it sticks to it longer. And so it's like an attentional glue. So not only do you pay attention to that detail, but you stay on it a little longer than you would if you weren't pre-aware. And this has all been tested in labs. So that's how that works. So making yourself pre-aware can give you those split seconds of focus, of staying with something that are going to make all the difference in the world. And so awareness, and particularly pre-awareness, will be able to intercede in that millisecond of my attention scouts going out and bringing back informations and make me stick to the one solution that I want longer, enough to respond in a millisecond. Just like motor vehicle knows we'll do for a hairpin turn. Mindfulness is related to this, but it's not the same thing. Mindfulness, I wish I had my cell phone here, but I turned it off. Mindfulness, the best way I can explain mindfulness, like over the years, we've come to appreciate mindfulness as being present to the moment. And I like that. I mean, because that's really brought mindfulness into everyday conversation to the point where we even use it with our kids at the dinner table. Be mindful. But mindfulness is actually more than that, and we can get a lot more use out of it if we pay attention to this. Mindfulness is actually the energy within our presence. So for example, on the cell phone, we have that, if you go to, you can go to a place on your cell phone where there's like a bar. And if you move the bar up, your flashlight gets brighter.
Yeah.
And if you slide it down, it gets duller. And so that's how mindfulness works. Mindfulness is the energy that you bring in, the wattage that you bring into the present moment, and you can increase it or you can decrease it. So I can be in the present moment and be very dull. And so I can be present all right, but I'm not taking much in because my energy is low. Mindfulness is you can increase the energy on any detail in the present moment. So for example, if I tell you to put your attention on your big toe, you can do that now. 2 seconds ago, you weren't even aware that it existed. But now you can put your attention on your big toe and you can increase the energy to the point where you can, wiggle it around and feel your sock. If you push it just right, you can feel the floor below your sock. You can feel your shoe, the sole of your shoe. If you don't have socks or shoes on, you can feel the air touching your toe. You can make your awareness and attention on that toe so acute that you can feel things that you are totally unaware of. So mindfulness is the energy that you bring into both awareness and attention. So it increases the wattage. When you use mindfulness with awareness, it becomes a whole different animal. Now it's a powerful tool to begin with, but now it's a really powerful tool. And if you use both of those with your fetching mechanism, if you make yourself pre-aware, then you can start to have regulation over moments. And there's another magical way to kind of do that. For years in the mind-body business, we've been talking about visualization, and visualization is really an ancient skill. It's nothing new, and athletes have used it forever, visualization. So what we do is we try to visualize the way we want something to be. We also use reflection. We look at something that happened and create a mental movie over it and kind of go over what we did and spot what was good and spot what we'd like to disappear next time we are in a similar experience. So I can use reflection. So let's say my partner rolls his or her eyes and I respond in a way I wish I never did. Then later on, I couldn't stop that. But later on, I can reflect on it and say, wow, that happened really quick, and try to see what disposition brought me into that. Try to see what I was feeling, thinking, acting, and so on, and brought me into that. And so and I can identify the things that brought me into it. And sometimes I find things that I didn't suspect that brought. But I can reflect on that and identify the exact feelings, thoughts, and actions that I want to edit or even edit out. And then I can create a new behavior as a substitute. When I create that as a substitute, I can visualize it now. I can visualize myself in the situation I'm trying to control and regulate, substituting the new behavior. Now, when I do, I'm going to make myself aware that that's what I want to change. I'm going to bring the energy of my awareness way up. I'm going to make myself really mindful of that. And I'm going to do it more than once. Because if I do it just once, it's not going to do much at all. Probably won't do anything, honestly. You have to do this many times to develop the habit, the pattern, to start to to start to put pressure on the other coordinates up here to disappear. You don't want them anymore, that you want these coordinates to be your default mechanism. And little by little, so let's say that you've got a meeting coming up at work, and let's say that at the meeting, you act a certain way and you want to change that. If you practice that before with awareness, mindfulness, repetition, visualization, and reflection, when you go into that meeting, you will already establish new coordinates and they'll start to work for you. They're not going to work magic for about 3 weeks. But in 3 weeks, you'll start to behave this way. You'll feel the other one decaying and going away. And then you'll have established a new behavior for yourself. It's just a wonderful way to change our behavior, the way our attention mechanism works. And again, it could be emotional. It could be your actions. It could be your thinking. You can change any part of your mind with that pattern.
I had two experiences, 15 to 18 years apart. And they were similar, but I had two different reactions to it. And maybe it was partly because from the first situation, I learned that I hadn't done anything wrong, but I was sort of taken to the woodshed by my employer. And the second time I was taken to the woodshed by my employer, different employer, but the first employer was there in the second instance because a corporation had bought both radio stations and he was still working for the one. I was working for another one. We were all together in the same building. Very unusual situation. And basically what happened was the first situation was where my boss told me after we had just redesigned our studios out at the transmitter site, I don't want you to move any furniture unless you check with me first, which I thought was a weird request. It's like, wow, hey, really control freak, aren't you? You don't even work out here and you don't want me to move the furniture. Well, one day I was training a new employee, a good friend who became a good friend of mine. And I was vacuuming and I needed to move this big counter space. And I moved it. Guess who shows up? The general manager, right? Oh, he went nuts, dragged me into the transmitter room, closed the door, and proceeded to ream me a new one. I couldn't sleep for 3 days, and I finally called him back out, and I said, we need to talk. And I explained to him, I says, I finally remembered why I moved that piece of furniture, because I was cleaning. I would have moved it back. And, of course, he couldn't have been more apologetic. Well, 15 to 18 years later, new corporation comes along. I'm working for a different station. They buy the station I'm working for. They buy the station that I used to work for, still run by the old general manager. And we were redesigning the studio again from a technical standpoint. And I was resisting the chief engineer's push to, we need to go ahead and hook this up. I said, the people that I've talked with said, no, not yet. We're waiting for the code. Finally, one day, I was called into the office of the new GM with the old GM sitting in a chair observing. And I knew I had done nothing wrong. And I will tell you that I sat in open body posture, which for those of you who don't know, is your both feet are on the floor. Your hands are on each of your knees, respectively, left and right. And you just sit there. And because I knew that I hadn't done anything wrong, I'm not saying I was in the right, I had to keep from laughing at the similarity to the situation I just described to you 18 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And I let the general manager rant and rave. He circled the conference table and me 3 or 4 times, that whole thing. I would look at the old GM thinking, do you remember you and I went through something like this not too long ago, and so forth. And of course, we had everything worked out and everything was good after all of that. Everything went according to plan. But it was those two situations where I could have acquiesced, gone back into my childhood, shrunk, been fearful, had trouble sleeping for the next 2 or 3 nights and that kind of thing. But it was a whole different perspective. Would you say that? And I was very attentive both times. The first time more out of fear than anything else. But this time more out of amusement of this little, the little game they were playing. Would you say that over that period of time, I was actually able to sort of rewrite the synapses or reformulate the chemistry to observe what was going on rather than get drawn into it emotionally?
Yeah, and I think that I mean there were. I don't want to speak for you, so I'd rather pose it as a question because that's a
Hmm.
great story. I love that story.
Hmm.
I really loved it. You know, in fact, my wife and I were talking pretty deeply on a similar topic of somebody who had the opposite experience, who woke up almost woke up 15 years later, and and it was like hadn't skipped a beat. The coordinates just kicked right in. But I think that your story's great. I mean, what do you it seems to me that there was probably a lot of new experiences or learning that you were drawing from somewhere
Yeah.
that might have new experiences that you had with new understandings,
Hmm.
but not necessarily that same incident, but
Yeah.
that came in to bear.
Yeah.
Do you think it was?
I think it was. I had been through quite a number of other things. I'd been through some personal growth programs over those years in between, and had those wonderful insights into myself and what have you, trying to do the growth work, as they say back then, and realized that if it ain't yours, don't own it. you know I certainly wasn't going to apologize for my position, because my position was solely based upon the information that I had from the various manufacturers of the equipment we were working with at that time. If they had told me something differently, I would have passed that on and said, oh, they just let me know that it's okay. As a matter of fact, after that incident, I did touch base with the manufacturer again, and they said, well, apparently whoever you spoke with misspoke, because actually the equipment will work if you hook it up right now, even without the code. It just means that the other piece that it's hooked up to isn't going to be 100% functional. Doesn't mean that you won't be able to do what you want to do. It just means that you'll only have X number of channels instead of Y, because you don't have the code. And as soon as we get you the code, then you can have Y number of channels. And it's like, if they had told me that from the very beginning, none of this would have happened.
Yeah.
But again, I was doing my job, being diligent. I wasn't going to jeopardize the station over some overzealous engineer at that time. That's the way I observed it. To say, okay, and then we flip the switch and the thing blows up or something, or shorts out or what have you. Now what are we going to do? And yet, if it had worked, I would have said, hey, okay, I'm wrong. The information I was given was incorrect, and I don't know why, but there you go. Before we go any further, I want to let our listeners know you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. We're talking about the 12 rules of attention with Dr. Joseph Cardello, PhD, I might add, and we certainly hope that you will go to his website. And that website actually is, if I'm not mistaken, it actually is your name, correct? It is actually josephcardello.com. That's JosephCardillo. That's CARDILLO.com. And you can also go to the website. There's a website for the book also called the 12 Rules of Attention.com. And we hope that you will avail yourselves of that as well. Now, before we come to the conclusion of our program, I wouldn't be surprised if there are people listening going, Richard, why haven't you asked him about the 12 rules? Well, I mean, come on. I mean, that's kind of what we're waiting for. Well, there are two reasons why I haven't asked him about the 12 rules. Number one is probably because we've been talking a little bit about the rules as we've been conversing here, even though we haven't labeled them. And number two is, not that this is an infomercial for the 12 rules of attention, but I want you to get the copy of the book, or I want you to go to his website. You've got to do the research as well. But let me ask you, one quick question here in reference to multitasking. Now, there are those who say they can multitask. Wonderful. You can do multiple. I multitask all the time, but I've got to go back and double check my work just to be on the safe side, because if I get distracted by a third thing or a fourth thing, then 1 and 2 and possibly 3 I may make some mistakes. I may screw up. And I remember a study that came out, I'm thinking a couple, 3 years ago. And it was a study to determine the level of productivity of single taskers versus multitaskers. And the evidence is probably pretty clear just when you think about it, that the productivity of the single taskers versus the multitaskers was higher for the single taskers than the multitaskers. And in spite of the fact that in many businesses prior to the virus and all of that stuff, a lot of people were being thrown into jobs where they were doing multiple tasks, whereas before you had 2 or 3 other people to do each of those individual tasks. And now one person is doing all of that stuff. And then they wonder why mistakes are made. Is business, because you obviously deal with companies as you move through the day and the week and the month and the year, are they starting to get the message that you can't do that to people if you want your company to succeed? Not if you want your employee not to walk out of here with a meltdown, but if your company is going to succeed, you've got to cut back on the workload of each individual if they're doing the job of 3 and 4 and 5 people.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. And, there's some factors that come into that, but yeah, I think that, I mean, one of the major sections of my book and my thinking is how do you bring yourself into what you're doing? Because I think that's so important. I started my whole my whole research really decades ago, trying to understand, when our mind slips into that beautiful flowing mindset, that we wish we could experience as many times as possible throughout the day, when things are just going great. It doesn't matter really what we're doing. We're just performing at the top of our game. We're not even thinking about, and when we're done, we're kind of happy and satisfied, and we don't feel the opposite. Like when we're doing something we don't like, or when we're overtasked and we feel labored and fatigued and all that. Everything's working pretty sharp for us. And I began everything trying to understand that mindset, and is there a way that we could self-regulate that, make it happen?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. And the answer is not only yes, but many of the things that we can do to self-regulate that mindset are simple. For somebody, it might be just going out and taking a walk.
Yeah.
When they're, taking a walk. Who hasn't done that? And what I try to lead people through in my book is the different things that allow you to find out what triggers your flowing mindset and what can lock you into it for the next task. Because one of the hallmarks of my work is I want to get you into the healthiest, most flowing mindset that you are in, that you can be in, and show you how to transfer that to whatever you're going to do next.
Right.
So the idea of getting into a great mindset is not new, but my idea is to try to get into whatever that flowing mindset feels like for you, to discover it in you and make it compatible with who you are as a person. And how can I transfer that into the very next task, whether it's powerlifting a bench press, or whether it's trying to get along with your children, your grandchildren, your spouse, your partner, whether it's trying to get along with the people at work, or whether it's trying to work privately on your own on something creative, and I found one thing that I found is that many mindsets transfer, not just this flowing mindset, although that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
There's an organized mindset that we all have. And we know it. We recognize it in ourselves when we really feel organized and we're working, and it's as if we're working from a plan, even though we're not. We're organized. And I have step-by-step ways of identifying that organized mindset within us individually, and how I can employ it then into the next thing I do. Because once you establish the mindset, once you create the coordinates, you can transfer them. And that's a big thing. That's a really big thing. If it's a relaxed mindset, you can transfer it. If it's an arousing mindset, you can transfer. So that's a big thing, because now you're choosing the state of mind that you want to bring in to the various experiences of your life. And they all call for slightly different things, and multitasking is one of those things that can disrupt it. But it's that's one of those words.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of those words. Like, let's say I'm driving down the highway, and my wife's sitting next to me, trying to go over with me a recipe for cheesecake or something. And I'm trying to negotiate turns on the interstate, and also remember how to. How we cook the cheesecake. That's not going to work out too well. But if she's following a map and explaining to me where the next turn is coming up, and I'm listening to her and watching for the turn, well, then that's going to work out okay, because they're closely related. So this word multitasking is kind of funny.
Yeah, it is. I speaking of maps, we used for the first time a couple 3 years ago. We used GPS on my phone to go. Now we knew already where we were going, so we were more using GPS and say Google Maps more as a diversion of sorts, just sort of entertainment. And back then, when we were using it, it wasn't that accurate. It was within about 100 feet. It's much more accurate today. So every so often, as we're traveling up the 101 towards Cambria, it would tell us at the next intersection, turn left and get back on the 101. Well, wait a minute. We never left the 101. So we'd be making derogatory comments towards her. What, are you crazy? And then all these kinds of things. And so usually it is more for entertainment than it is for actual guidance. Although there are times, yes, I absolutely use it in that regard. Multitasking, yes, I'm guilty of it from that standpoint. But I have processes that I go through. I am very organized. Matter of fact, now that I am doing video editing that I've been doing since August of 2020. Actually, going back to July, come to think of it, in Zoom Theater. I helped to produce Zoom Theater on the internet for a group of local, and when I say local, Central Southern California actors and directors and so forth. And it's really a lot of fun. And I remember talking with a good friend of mine who is a videographer, who used to do some video editing upstairs above the radio station. And he said the first and main rule in video editing is be organized, because if you're not, when you get down the road with that piece of video that you're working on, it's going to be a mess. And so I'm very organized, because I'm as organized with that as I have been for the last 20, 30 years or more with audio editing, where, I can, if we do a commercial for someone today that we did 10 years ago, and they come in and say, we'd like to upgrade the script a little bit, but we want to keep the music. Do you still have that? I said, yep, I still have it. I even have the session that it was created in, and all we do is pull out the voice and put in your voice today. Got the music there already. It's all set to go, and we'll save it as a revised version, and it takes as much, it doesn't take time at all. So being organized is key in pretty much any endeavor. No matter what you're dealing with. And these 12 rules are not just for the workplace, for business.
Yeah, right.
These would apply in every area of one's life, wouldn't they?
Yeah, yeah, because one of the things that I just enjoy, presenting at with many of the groups that I talk to, is that, of course, I've been working in the mind body business, to try to understand and add some more information to what we know about the body mind connection for decades now. And the one thing that keeps coming back to me over and over again is it doesn't matter what aspect of our lives we're looking at. It doesn't matter what part of our body mind connection, whether it's physical, emotional, cognitive, spiritual, doesn't matter what it is. Attention is going to play a major role in it. I mean, attention is going to play a major role to, the way I behave in an office meeting with my partner, whether I have an insight or not as I'm trying to type a creative manuscript or do a piece of research. But even if I go into other realms, like if I consider a meditation I might be doing, attention is going to play a prime role in that meditation. And even if in the meditation you want to turn off your attention and just not be paying attention to anything in particular, you still have to turn it off. So you still have to go in there and regulate your attention to turn it off, to make sure that you have no attention and you just have consciousness. Attention is at the core of it all. It's something we don't suspect. If we're depressed, if we're happy, if we're aroused, if we're excited and joyful, if we lack all those things, it might be the way we're paying attention, and likely it is.
that almost sounds like an oxymoron. In order to not pay attention, you've got to pay attention to not paying attention.
Yeah. You got to get in there and turn that thing off.
Turn it off. Turn it off. Turn it off. And that's a very good thing to do, especially if we're going to dive into 2020 or the 2020s, the decade of perfect vision, where we encourage people to go within, to spend that contemplative time with consciousness, with the still small voice and so forth, to find peace and calm and tranquility and so forth and so on. You've got to go in and you've got to turn that off. I have a real difficult time. I used to do it. I don't anymore, because I can't do it. It's just not in me right now to do this unless I'm in a place where I'm free to. And that is, I can't wear both earbuds or a set of headphones over both ears. I cannot diminish one ear, both ears. I've got to keep one ear open to be aware of other things that might be happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the exception to that rule might be if I was somewhere out in nature, my wife and I might take the camper, the travel trailer and the truck and go camping somewhere. And we're just going to sit back in our chairs and relax and just enjoy nature and just listen. But in terms of I guess, sort of masking or covering up one of my senses, I have a hard time with that, because I feel as though I need to be aware at all times, even though I might have either you, Joseph, in my ear, or music, or maybe the Celestine Prophecy, which, by the way, you elicited in my mind that book, because you talked about messages that we give to one another. You phrased it a little differently, but it sounded to me in that fashion like one of the examples that you gave, where someone you were having to deal with that you didn't think you wanted to, but you said, if I'm going to practice what I preach, I better listen to this person. And they gave you something that allowed you to go up and write your piece upstairs. And that, to me, is so critical in terms of paying attention. I've had that happen to me on more than one occasion, where I'm walking in Santa Barbara. I'm walking, taking a walk, just relaxing. And all of the sudden, I come across somebody. And somehow we hit it off. I had this happen with one gentleman. And I can't remember if I was carrying a book or he was, but we got to talking a little bit. I had never seen this guy before. And somehow we'd had this little connection because of the book. And our conversation was no more than 5 minutes. And we both left the other, at least I left, feeling really good, very positive, very, that kind of thing. It was really kind of cool.
Oh, it's very cool. And I've been working with new and different people all the time. And I'm working with some people now. And when I brought my ideas to the table, because we're working on a joint research project right now, but when I brought my ideas to the table, someone said to me, well, she said, that's really this idea that you have on attention and coordinates and so on. She goes, that's really kind of like a skeleton system. She says, that's really behind karma. She said, that's really behind the law of attraction. She said, that's behind some of these really, kind of popular ideas these days. And I said, yes, absolutely. Because when you bring your attention in to things like the law of attraction, you start to understand the physiology of how that happens. You understand, listen, I'm a biological being, and there's parts of my biology that are here to do just that, and there's parts of my biology that are here to participate in karmic activity. But again, knowing what they are helps.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If you don't know what they are, then it's kind of hard.
Yeah. And then we learn and build on it. So when you have these experiences, when I have them, like the one that you recalled that I had with that individual, we got to pay attention to that. We got to, something happened. And don't I want that to happen more? Don't I want my work to be better and happen easier?
Yeah. You also described what most people in sports would term being in the zone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I got to tell you, there are times when I'm doing some production, I'm producing this or that, it doesn't matter what it is. And the next thing I know, I look up and it's like 2 or 3 or 4 hours later. I've completed the project. I had a great time putting it together, and I listened back to it and it just sounds fantastic. I mean, and again, I say that with the greatest amount of humility I can muster, because I wouldn't be able to do most everything that I'm doing if it weren't for a bunch of other people. So this is not a solo act here. I have a responsibility to carry on the lineage of thousands of people over plus 40 years in this business, in terms of being able to do what I can do. And I'm very grateful for that, and so forth. But being in that space it is just so awesome. And sometimes it's building something. Even when I was having to cut down some trees that had died on the property where we live, and I almost crashed one of the trees into a fence. I mean, I did everything. I remember reading and seeing some stuff on YouTube about how to fell a tree and make sure you do it right so it goes where you want it to go. Well, it did, and it missed the fence by literally inches.
Yes.
Or if my wife, she back in Phoenix bought a greenhouse, and a buddy of mine and we worked on building it together. It took several months. We just bought a new redwood framed greenhouse here in Santa Barbara that we're going to build together. As soon as the weather cools down and we can spend the time outside, we're going to start working together and building that. And even in that, we will be in the zone because we'll be focused on building that. And one other thing that I will share with you real quickly, my first wife and I bought a house back in 1993 in Phoenix, Arizona. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath brick house for $43,000. It was, I think, 1,400 square feet. Nice backyard and everything. And I told my wife my then wife, that here's the focal point. Okay. It doesn't matter. And then we saw the house on September 1st and we closed on the 30th of September. I said, doesn't matter what happens. You've got to always remember what we're doing. And it's not fighting with the appraisers. It's not dealing with the insurance companies. The phrase that we used throughout the entire month was, we're buying a house. We are buying a house. That's what we're doing in this month. We are buying a house. And no matter what came along, and we got through it all, we stayed focused on the fact that that's
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people, do they not? They get distracted. Their attentions are distracted away from their goal because of the details that come along. And granted, the details will make you or break you, but if you get stuck in them, you might be done.
Right. And we talk about a lot of that, what you just relayed to the listeners in my book and in other researches that I've done as well. We talk about using phrases and using words to kind of reel you in when you start to go astray. We all need to be reeled in. And power words, athletes have used, I call them power words. Athletes have used power words forever, to regulate all kinds of things, when to stop, when to go, when to widen your spotlight of attention, when to narrow your spotlight into a real tight focus, and when to execute. We've got all kinds of tricks that we can do with that. By the way, one trick I wanted to share with your readers is we know, or your listeners, so much of what we talk about sounds sometimes academic, but it's really quite easy. It's as easy as taking a walk. One of the things that works really well to help get us in that flowing mindset that we were talking about is natural sound. So I encourage everybody to find some natural sound or some piece of music. We already know it puts you in a mood. We know, here's a piece of music that relaxes me. Here's one that really pumps me up, so I'll use it for athletics. But let me tell you this. One of the things that we try to do from the research end of all this is to find how can we take these things that we already do, like take a walk, like play a piece of music, like play the sound of a waterfall or play the sound of a brook, play the sound of rain. How can we take some of these things that we do naturally that calm us down and amplify their effect? Yeah. So if we were talking about pharmaceuticals, it would be like increasing the milligrams or make them last longer. Yes. Well, here's a real simple thing that your listeners can try. We all have a piece of music that pumps us up, and we like to put it on. And I used to tell some athletes that I was training, look, I know you're going to think this is not going to work, but try it and watch how it works. One of the things you can do is take that favorite piece of yours that really pumps you up and put it aside for a minute. And before you put that on, instead, play the slowest thing you got. Play the slowest piece that you have that mellows you right out. Don't play it too long, about 5 minutes. If you play it too long, it won't work. About 5 minutes. Let yourself relax. Let yourself breathe. Get all the tension out of you with that slow piece, and then put on the one that really pumps you up. So you're going from a real slow pace thing to something, that's flying, and it'll take you up higher. It'll take you up higher longer, and you'll literally feel the difference. If you do it every time you need it, if you say, okay, I need it in this, before I go jogging or before I go to an office meeting or on my way home from work, whatever it is, you'll know when you need it. If you do it every time, after a while, it will become an automatic function.
Oh, wow.
You won't need the music at all. What you're doing is you're using that. We're using conditioning. You're using that to condition your mind, and that will trigger the electrical and chemical patterns that we talked about at the beginning of this, and then they'll be automated, and you'll just do it. You'll be like Nike.
Exactly. Just do it. Just do it. We're talking today with Dr. Joseph Cardello, and he's the author of the latest work, 12 Rules of Attention, and it is how to basically avoid screw-ups, free up headspace. I still think of a computer hard drive when I think of that. Do more and be more at work. And I want to thank you so much for sharing with us and our listeners and our viewers these concepts, because it's through the work that you are doing and the work that others are doing that is going to make the biggest difference in changing this world for the better for everyone. When we start paying attention to the here and the now, and every so often, the thought comes to me that I use this analogy of the recording. You can see it in the background. All right, there's a line. There's a little white line there, and on the left side of the line, you see the wave. It's being created. On the right side, it's blank. It's at that white line that is the now. And the moment you see the wave, it's now the past. The moment, the instant you see the wave, it's already over. It's happened. So it's that white line, if you will. That's the demarcation for the here and the now that we need to be in, and to do one other thing, and that is just to be. And that's kind of what we talk about on this program. And I thank you for bringing us this new choice of 12 rules to help others to better their lives, their experiences in their relationships, in their workplace, in every area of their lives. And we greatly appreciate what you have to offer. And you've got a lot of other stuff we could have talked about, but we wanted to focus on these 12 rules today. But we'd love to have you back to talk about some of the other areas of health and wellness that you deal in terms of mind, body, spirit.
I'd love to. You know, I've listened to several of your shows, quite a few, and I love the material that you're bringing forth to the public. And I think it's vital. It's vital information, and it's information that makes our lives better pretty quickly and pretty easily. Why not? You know, why not?
Well, that's the beauty of what you and others have put together, and that is that you've kept it simple. We humans, we tend to want to make things complicated, because if they're not complicated, then it's not worth it. Supposedly, that's the myth. That's the myth. But when it's kept simple, it's just, life can just flow. And again, I thank you so much for your time. I do have 3 final questions for you that I do like to ask my guests. But before I do, I need to remind our listeners that this program is on the radio at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on Sundays and 1 a.m. Monday mornings, streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. The podcast broadcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, and many other locations. And now the video version of Tell Me Your Story is available on the Tell Me Your Story YouTube channel. So you probably can just type in "Tell Me Your Story" and boom, it'll take you to these interviews. This is one of those that we're going to have up there as well, and in probably fairly record time, I'm hoping. And also, if you'd like to support this program, we do have Patreon and PayPal accounts for your security as well as ours, so that you can support us financially. We'll take energetic healing as well. So to the questions that I have for you. The first is, who is Joseph Cardello?
Well, first, I'm husband to my wife. I'm father to my children. That's who I am. And beyond that, I just feel, I'm somebody enjoying the journey, with everybody else, including all the little creatures, on this planet, and and trying to reap as much understanding about our journey, its purpose, and make it good as I can for myself, good as I can for people around me, and I enjoy that. I enjoy sharing ways of comprehending the journey and ways of making it better. When some of us get a good idea, it's not always mine. We're sitting down, we get a good idea. I want to be there. That's who I am.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you're doing now?
I want to take some science that can be complicated in the understanding of some ideas. The science, knowing the science of how the mind might work, how the body might work, and so on, I want to take some of that complicated science and kind of rechannel it into literature and other medias, so that it can be brought into any household, and anyone can find ideas in there that pertain to what's going on in their lives, and use them to try to make their lives a little better. Kind of like, having a better refrigerator or stove. Just I want to bring something into your household that will make your life better. I want everybody's life to be better.
Absolutely. And finally, what is your life's purpose?
I think it's discovering that purpose. I think that my wife and I say this a lot. Of course, here I am bringing her into the conversation unedited. But, I think that we were given a mind for a reason that's connected to that. And I think that we were given a mind and an intellect to try to understand what our purpose is, to try to get us there. And it's a constant evolving thing. I think that is my purpose, is to evolve. That's another one of those things, those oxymorons. It's one of those things, like, I'm aware of it, but I'm never there really.
I'm here to evolve to evolve.
Yeah.
Well, again, Joseph, thank you so much for joining us here on the program and sharing the ideas from the 12 rules of attention. And we look forward to talking with you again. We will also be linked to your website so that people can, as we've said before, continue their evolutionary process. We thank you for listening to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast podcast, love to lol.